Welcome back. Today's episode is one that you are going to want to pull out your pen and notepad for because my guest gives so much amazing financial and wealth building advice. We talk about topics from debt, retirement, building a wealth mindset, and the best way to invest your money. She is a financial literacy coach and powerhouse in the financial industry, a beacon of light for women seeking financial liberation, and is the dynamic founder of the Era of Women and Wealth, an all-female wealth-led initiative that stands at the intersection of empowerment and economic independence. Backed by her robust credentials, including her Series 7 and 66 licenses and being CFP enrolled, she goes above and beyond conventional financial advice. She doesn't just guide, but she educates and empowers too. So with that, please welcome Meaghan Keeven to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Thank you for coming. And we were talking right before the show that, I was really wanting to have a episode all about finances and wealth and money and management and all that. And so, it was fate. It worked out great that we
Absolutely.
came in contact, and I'm so happy to have you on here, especially because with the way of the world right now, I feel like this episode can help so many. And so yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I want to start out by you just kind of taking us through your story of being a financial coach and then what led you to focus your work a lot on women specifically.
Yeah, so really as my career like in the finance industry just continued to get like further into it, I really noticed that I had a lot of women clientele coming to me specifically asking for just education on the basics. It wasn't necessarily that like they didn't have the money like to invest or just have money period, but they had the money and they didn't know what to do with it or how to manage it. So it grew really organically just out of pure like request from clients, and then from just being in public and people being like, I wish I had someone to teach me, in that kind of like big sister, like best friend type of way. And so I thought to myself, well, there's no reason like why women can't have that, so that's what we're going to create. And
Mhm.
so my business was created like that simply.
Wow. So it just like came to you almost like this is what you should focus on, and it sounds like it kind of put you on that path.
Yeah, it really did. Because it's one thing, like, you're serving people, but
Mhm.
when something repeatedly comes up and the same questions are asked, it really makes you pay attention and say, okay, this is obviously an issue at hand. So, what can we do to fix it? Teach people about it or make them just feel more comfortable about it. And
Mhm.
so I was like, this is something that like I'm going to take on as my mission, is to fully educate women, help them understand money and understand how to use it and manage it correctly so that they can be more impactful in their everyday life.
Yeah. And I know, like, I don't want to speak for all women, but I know for myself, like, finances and just money and that whole world of like investing and everything, it's intimidating for someone who, like, I don't have an accounting degree. I don't know finances from Adam, like
Yeah.
so I just I can relate to other women who feel that way. It is intimidating, and so you just kind of you don't even want to go into it because you're like, I don't want to look dumb. I don't even know what verbiage to use,
Yeah.
when I'm talking to somebody like a finance person. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I think like you hit on a couple of things there. Like people are intimidated, they feel ashamed that they don't know it. And I always tell people, like, if you don't go to school for it, or you didn't, try to seek out that knowledge, or you weren't taught it in your home, where were you going to learn it? Right.
Mhm.
And so our society has really done a disservice with the stigma that they put around money and in general, right? Whether you're male or you're female, you're not supposed to talk about it. It's taboo to talk about. It's rude to talk about. But it's not. It's something really that should be spoken about freely, emotionally, because it is something that impacts every single one of us, males and females, on a day in and day out basis, right? It's like the big decisions in our life that we're making, and also like the little everyday things that are running in the background. Like money is constantly surrounding you. And so I really think that it's hugely important just for our society as a whole to kind of like take that and flip that stigma, just a 180, like talk about it, be aware of it. And that once you start talking about it, you kind of take the power of like the shame or like the embarrassment or like the anxiety away from it because you're sitting there saying, okay, I know I don't know about this, but somebody please teach me. Well, right
Mhm.
then and there, you're gaining that self-confidence, and that's really the more we talk about it, the easier it's gonna get for people, and then it's not gonna be this shameful, guilty, anxious thing. It's gonna be a confidence, empowerment, impactful
Yes,
thing.
empowerment for
Yeah.
sure. I can relate because I do feel more empowered when I do just ask for help, just ask for someone to explain it to me, like I do with on this podcast,
Yeah,
having
yeah.
guests and I'm like asking the questions and these of course I'm trying to relate to listeners listening, but these questions are things that I want to know myself. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
empowering for sure. Well, I love what I have come across on your social media and everything that you do in your coaching. And so I want to start off by asking when someone comes to you with the goal of financial freedom, because I know for myself this is a huge goal of mine and I had to get clear on this goal because I feel like when I was starting out, as an adult and you're working and it's like, what are you working for? Well, oh, I want a new car. I want the latest iPhone. I want this. But then when I sat back and I mean, maybe it's as I've gotten older too, I've come to this idea of like, well, I want financial freedom. I want to be able to just, if I want to go on a week-long vacation, I'm going on that week-long vacation to where I want to go. I want to, and this probably means something different to everyone what financial freedom is to you, but what is something where do you start with clients when they come to you and they're like, I my goal is financial freedom. What do I need to do to get there?
Yeah, so again, like you are actually doing like such a great job like in and of yourself like defining things, right?
Mhm.
Like and that is the biggest thing and the first step that somebody has to do. They have to think about it. Like I cannot tell them what their definition of financial freedom is and you hit on it, right? It transitioned for you.
Mhm.
At first maybe it was like being able to buy whatever car you wanted and then it transitioned into I can go on whatever vacation I want to go to. And I think that's another thing that society does a really terrible job of is they put everybody in a box of like you're not financially free until you can retire at age 40. You're not financially free until you own 3 cars, 2 homes and have $1 million in the bank.
Mhm.
That's not what financial freedom is. Financial freedom is something that brings you peace and that makes you feel secure and stable. And so the first thing that I do with clients is I really ask them like what do you value in life? Because what you value is most likely going to then like lead to a goal, right? Like if I tell you your goal should be to own 3 cars and 2 homes, you're like, "Well, I don't really care about
Right.
that." So, like,
Yeah.
you're gonna be that less likely to reach that goal, right?
Mhm.
But if I tell you, "I want you to be able to go on 3 vacations a year," you're gonna be like, "Heck yeah, man." Like,
Yeah, it's gonna light
I
me up.
yeah, it's gonna light you up. You're gonna be like, "Okay, what do I have to do?" Like, concrete steps to get to that, right? So it's impactful to you. So I walk through an exercise with people and say, "I want you to tell me what you value in your life." Once they start kinda naming those things off, then, like, the goals start to kinda just naturally fall into
Mhm.
place, and I give them the example of, like, for me right now, like, I'm a mom, right? I have 2 kids, and my financial freedom is the fact that I wake up in the morning, I get a workout in, and I take them to school, and I pick them up, and I can take them to, like, their sports practices, right?
I was
Uh,
just thinking about this on the way here. I was
yeah.
feeling, like, really grateful that that I'm able to do that, so that's a value of mine as well.
Correct,
Yeah.
100%, but, like, to me, or maybe 10 years ago, it was my financial freedom goal was having my student loans paid off and, being in my first home with, a 20% down payment. So that was my financial freedom, and it's okay to have that shift and that transition as you go throughout your life. And I
Mhm.
think the most important thing is just to continually like reflect and redirect if necessary. And that's what's going to tell you what your financial freedom is. And then once you actually have a concrete thing, then you can start making the goals and, like, reverse, like, engineer it to reach those actual goals.
Mhm. That's good. And so on the contrast of that, I wanna talk about for some recommendations for someone who, may have multiple credit cards racked up. They're feeling very overwhelmed. You're swimming in these high interest rates, and it's like just when you feel like, okay, I made a big payment, well, interest is hitting, and you're right back to where you were, you feel like. And then, it's telling you like, well, if you pay this much, this will be paid off in 10
Oh, I
years. And
know.
you're like,
The
oh
worst.
my gosh.
The worst.
And like we talked about a little bit, the way of the world right now, I mean, with the economy and everything, people, are struggling a little bit financially. So credit cards, there may be three that we got almost 75% or plus limits on. And so, what is something that you recommend someone doing when they're feeling that overwhelmed feeling of all of that debt? And do you recommend consolidation loans, or what is something that you teach?
So consolidation loans are tricky, right? The majority of them out there are not to the consumer's benefit. They're to the credit or the
Mhm.
lender. It's to their benefit. So I would say like caution to that. I think before you even get to that point, though, there's a few really simple steps that you can do to kind of open your awareness and start creating a plan. Because I think the biggest thing for people is just knowing where to start. It may not necessarily be like taking the actions, but they're just like, dude, I don't know where to start. I'm so confused by all of this. I don't want to make the wrong move. So I'm just not going to make a move at all.
Mhm.
And so, again, another exercise that I've walked through with individuals before is I have them gather all of their cards, what the interest rates associated with those cards are, what the balances are, what would be, that gross payoff number.
Oh my gosh.
And when we literally like list them out, because there's something that happens to our brains when we see everything listed out in a very like organized manner, that then we can actually take that information and say, okay, you didn't even know you had these other two credit cards lingering out there. And maybe they have the highest interest rate associated with them. So then
Mhm.
I like automatically we can look at those two and we can say, okay, is it best to pay off the ones with the highest interest rate? So we kind of stop that, on the treadmill type of
Mhm.
exercise. Or do we want to pick one that has like a very like small amount on it and we can pay that one off to kind of get that psychological win and get the motivation going? So there's different techniques and strategies that you can use when it comes to debt payoff. And I think it's a little bit individualized, but those are the two main types. But the biggest thing is to know what you actually have. And so the exercise of writing down, getting organized, that's the biggest thing for anyone to do. And that can in and of itself maybe for some individuals create anxiety or it can take the anxiety away, but either way it helps you at least be aware of where you're at, and that's always going to be the biggest thing in finance is like being aware.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's good because I feel like for me, if I've ever in the past, like, had a little too much on a credit card, I'm like, "Oh, I need to get this paid off."
Yeah.
It's almost like I wanna avoid it,
Yeah,
and I feel like maybe that's the case for a lot of
it
people. You
is.
just wanna avoid it, you don't even wanna look at it, but I can see where writing it down, looking at what you have, from a broad scope, and you're just like, "Okay, we can do this now. This is how we're gonna" you make a plan from there
Yes.
rather than avoiding.
Yeah. And I think like sometimes like just as human beings, like we need it to be in our face in a way,
Mhm,
right? For lack of a better term. But the more that you're aware of it, the more you're probably going to the more likely I should say you're going to be to take action on it because you're like, okay, now I actually know this is doable and I can do it. So I'm going to like I've got a starting point, so now let's just start.
mhm,
And then again, it's called like one of the methods is called the snowball method. And it's literally like a snowball, right? Like you do one, then you do another, and it just keeps going and compounding. And then most people are like, it really wasn't that hard to pay these two cards off. I just didn't even know what I had on them or what the interest rate associated with it was. So
mhm.
yeah, it's super helpful just to be able to see it and know where you're at with things.
Yes. And what are your tips with credit cards? Do you recommend them? Do you not?
I
Are
do.
you like, have 1, have 3?
Yeah, again, right? Like we have to be responsible. We have to somewhat know ourselves. And like, can we change our habits? Absolutely. Credit cards are a very useful, powerful tool in your finances. And there's a lot that goes into like our credit score, right?
Mhm.
And credit cards are a big part of building our credit score.
That is why I got my first one because
Yeah.
they were like, "You have no credit." I'm like, "Well, how do I do that?"
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And so I do think credit cards are good for the fact of like they help you build credit, but you have to know how to use them responsibly. You have to be able to, you have to know your limits.
Mm,
There's like, are you making your payments on time? What is your payment history like? I don't think that you necessarily need to have 10 of them, but I mean, if you have three or four, that's still not even a bad thing. So I think just being responsible with them is one thing.
mhm.
And then another thing is too, is you have to think about this too. Again, it sounds like I'm like doomsday over here, but I'm not. Credit cards are actually like very safe. Like they can give you the ability that if something were to happen, you're only liable for a very small amount of what, fraudulent activity like occurred on the card versus if that was on your debit card, that instantly comes out of your account and
Mhm.
it's like I don't really know what to tell you. There's, banks have safety measures in place too, but credit card companies kind of give you an extra layer of security when it comes to that type of activity, or those maybe like negative things that could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, we there for a while, it seemed like gas pumps were
Yeah.
getting hacked
Yep.
so often, and so we just got crazy, and we're like, we're only doing credit cards at the gas
Yeah.
pumps, and we still do that, like, that's all we do is, um, credit card at the
Yeah.
gas because it freaked me out so bad. I'm
Yeah.
like, "No way."
I mean, and think about it too. Like, there's some really fun things with credit cards. Like,
Points, yeah.
yeah, I am not sponsored by Amex or anything, but I love my American Express card. I mean,
Mhm.
I get so many kickbacks from it. I have a business one and I have a personal one, and I've had it for literally like I think over 10 plus years, and I love the like perks that come with
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And if you are able to pay it off every month, then there's no problem, right? But
Mhm.
that's on me. That's my responsibility as the consumer to know what I have the ability to spend or not spend
Mhm.
on a monthly basis. So again, I think they're a really great tool. It's just you have to use them responsibly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm also not sponsored by Southwest yet, but I do love we have a
Yeah.
Southwest, business card, and it's great because my husband owns a concrete contracting company, and so we have, like, large
Mhm.
purchases all the time, and I'm like, "We fly for free, baby."
Absolutely. I get it.
Yeah,
I
it's
totally get it.
awesome. So I wanted to segue a little bit into talking about like retirement plans. So, most of us, if we have a benefits package with our employer, we most likely have some sort of retirement plan with them, like a 401k. Um, and I want if you can touch on that, kind of like how to utilize that in the best way if that's something that you have from your employer, and then also talk about an IRA and if you should have both.
Yeah, so those are really great questions. So, yes, if your employer is offering you the benefit of having a 401k, a 403b, a 457, and the difference between those are just what type of organization is your employer, and so they can only offer you certain ones like a 401k, a 403b, 457.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's new. I
But
I
but
just
they
learned that.
yeah, but they function if not the same, very, very similar.
Okay.
And so, but people get kind of tripped up by that. Like,
Mhm.
well, I have a 401k. I don't know what a 403b is. Well, it's just is the company for profit or non for profit. That's really the only
Oh,
difference. Yeah.
okay.
So my advice, just on a very, I shouldn't even say advice, just education on a very broad level is if your employer is matching you in some way, shape, or form, if they say, hey, if you put 5% in, we're going to give you 7%, put your 5% in all day long.
Mhm.
Now, the biggest question that I get is, well, should I do more than that? That is a very individualized strategy of whether or not we would say, yes, do that, don't do that, because it depends on what you have outside of your employer plan. And that leads into kind of what you were asking about an IRA.
Mhm.
So your IRA is different than your employer plan. Your IRA is an individual retirement account, and there's two common forms that most individuals hear or know about, and that's what we some people refer to it as a traditional, meaning pre-tax dollars go into it. So no tax has been taken out of that money, which means that when you take a distribution after age 59 and a half or later, you're going to have to pay tax on that money that you take as a distribution because you were never taxed by it. And right, the government's always going to get their money
Mhm.
in some way, shape, or
Some
form.
way.
Yeah. Now, the other big like hype thing is a Roth IRA. So again, it's an individual retirement account. It's outside of your employer, but it functions exactly the opposite. You fund that account with after-tax money. So the growth that occurs within that account and the distribution is tax-free because you used money that's already been taxed to grow that account. So you're not going to be taxed on it again because as of right now, the government can't tax you twice on it.
Oh, okay.
So I love a
And
Roth
that's not
IRA.
after a certain age. Is that after a certain age, or is that
59 and a half is when you can take a distribution without penalty. So you can always take a distribution
okay?
prior, but you're going to have a 10% penalty.
And that's for the Roth IRA as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So there's always going to be stipulations to accounts, but Roth IRAs are absolutely fantastic. IRAs are really great tools too, and this is where once you kind of start accumulating more types of accounts, it's really great to start using other resources like a CPA because they can look at your overall picture at the end of the year or throughout the year and say, hey, it would be tax advantageous for you to contribute to this traditional IRA versus the Roth IRA this year. So always there's a lot that goes into like what type of account you pick. But yeah, there are plenty to pick from and they all function slightly differently. But your employer plan is different from your traditional IRA or your Roth IRA. And you can actually have all three of those.
Do you recommend having all three?
Yes, when you get to a certain point, there's always a strategy of like why you have one type of account. And like, do you like the traditional, for example, do you need a lot of deductions to keep you out of like the next tax bracket? Right. So that's how we use those. The Roth IRA, does that individual just want something that is purely tax-free money? And again, right, that's tax advantageous to that person. So the different accounts serve different purposes. And yeah, I mean, the more investment accounts you can have, like, do it, go for it, build, and build.
Nice. Well, so I want to also talk about a rule of thumb that, speaking of retirement anyway, I want to talk about a rule of thumb that you go by when talking to people about what they need in order to retire. So can you talk a little bit on, what you coach people on that?
Yeah, so this is another interesting question that I think maybe there's like misinterpretation because you hear these like the rule of 4% like of withdrawal and like yes, that's a very like down quick way to do it, but there's a lot of factors that go into what you actually need in retirement. And one of the biggest questions is like, what do you actually want your lifestyle to be in retirement? Like that again varies greatly from person to person.
Mhm.
And so
And to maintain the lifestyle that you're used
correct.
to.
Thank you. Like you
Yeah.
totally hit that on the head. So like a big question is like what do you feel like you would need in today's dollars to live this same lifestyle in retirement? Meaning I spend $10,000 a month right now. Would I be okay if I had the same lifestyle when I'm 65 that I do now? Yeah, I could do that, right? Most likely, I'm going to have my mortgage paid off, my car's paid
Mhm.
off. So that would free up even more cash flow for me for my 10,000 now because maybe 2,500 of my cash flow right now is going to my mortgage and maybe 600 of it's going to my car. I don't know.
Mhm.
So that's the question is what lifestyle do you want? And what do you want to be able to maintain in retirement? And so I rule of thumbs are okay, but I don't feel like it gives you that like tailored individual like strategy or approach to it.
Okay, so I want to talk about personal saving plans too. And so I also, like I said, I saw one of your posts, and it said, it's not your salary that makes you rich, it's your spending habits. And I liked that. And I heard on a podcast, I think it was Ed Millett, he told a story about um, this millionaire janitor.
Uh-huh.
And have you heard it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I love Ed Millett's
And I can't
podcast. Yeah.
I might botch it because it's been a while since I've listened to this episode, but he basically was talking about how this janitor who made like 45,000 a year was a millionaire, and it
Mhm.
was all about because what he did with that 45,000 that made him into a millionaire. So, can you talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit? I know I kinda segued a little bit
Yeah.
from that, but, kind of like how what you meant by that post, like, it's not your salary that makes you rich, it's your spending habits, and how that can also tie into a good savings plan.
Yeah, so multiple things in that. When you think about it, there are so many individuals that make 6 figures, some that even make 7 figures, and they are broker than broke because of their spending habits.
Mhm,
And then to your point about the janitor, right? Like he was making 40,000 a year and he was a millionaire
mhm.
because of his spending habits.
Right.
And what I mean by that is that guy was able to take a very little amount and be very effective and very impactful because he was deliberate with what he was spending on, and maybe he wasn't luxurious, he wasn't, doing or buying any and everything he wanted, whereas sometimes people with what I call the lifestyle creep, they're making plenty of money, but they have nothing to show for it because they are constantly, the whole like keeping up with the Joneses, or I want the newest iPhone, or I got to have a brand new car every 2 years, or like, oh, and now we need a bigger house, and they have nothing to show for it.
Mhm,
Again, that's their spending habit. So salary is almost a thing, like, yeah, it does matter, right? But it's more about what you do and how you spend your money.
mhm.
And so again, it just brings me back to the point. You can be super impactful with a very little amount of money and consistency. And I think that's a big misconception that people make is they think, oh my gosh, I've got to like have this crazy salary. I've got to make all this money and I have to invest large amounts of money for it to amount to anything. And that is like, couldn't be like further from the truth.
Mhm.
Like you take someone that consistently puts $50 a month into a Roth IRA for years and years and years, they're a millionaire.
Yeah.
I mean, that it's as simple as that.
Mhm.
But it's the fact that they created the mindset, then they created the habit, they did the action, and the end result was astonishing. When most people think like it doesn't work that way. They're like, "Oh, I'm not going to do it because you got to have a lot of it."
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not true.
And then when they are driving around that Maserati, but they have, like, a ton of money in the bank still, it looks a little better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know in your coaching, you talk a lot about mindset and on your social media for
Mhm.
sure. And I think you're also very personable in your practice, and I like that. I love how because it's not just it's not just numbers, I guess.
Yeah.
It's more of a, like you say, a mindset. And I would love for you to talk about that. Like, what is a wealth mindset and how having that can be so beneficial no matter what your salary is?
Yeah, I think a big part of it for me is like gratitude. We were just talking about this, right? Like me being able to like take my kids to school, like I'm so grateful for that, and
Mhm.
that doesn't cost me anything, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like something big that we have to take a look at is again like what are our values, and what do we truly align with, and then we need to shift that into our mindset. And so if you're sitting there telling me like, "Oh, I really, really value family vacations," but then I look at your debit statement and all I see is Uber Eats for the week. No, you value Uber Eats. Like you don't
You don't
value.
wanna cook.
Yeah, like, and
Yeah.
so I just think, right, like you have to take a look at like what truly means something to you.
Mm,
And once you have that in your head, then it's like, okay, how do I actually make an impact now? And so if you want a wealth mindset, it's the I value this. I want to really get good at this. And I'm going to put the time, the energy, the effort, and build the habits to this. And then something naturally just happens, like with the human psychology. And I know people say, like it's like a farce or, like
mm,
it's woo woo, whatever you want to call it. But like what you tell yourself and the thoughts that you think in your head really do create your actions.
mhm,
And so, again, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could be the wealth mindset of, I paid off all of my student loan debt, or I'm going to pay off all my student loan debt. I am capable of doing it, and I'm going to do it. And here's my plan to do it. Well, then guess what happens? That plan actually happens, and
mhm.
and that's your wealth mindset. Like you did something that you told yourself you were going to do, you created confidence in yourself, then that's going to lead into another area of your life. So now I paid off my student loan debt. I'm going to put $50 a week of my paycheck into a high yield savings account. And it just naturally, again, like starts to trickle down and trickle into other areas that you're like, oh, yeah, like I did that. Now I have the confidence to do it again. And you want to keep doing it.
Mhm.
It's all human psychology behind it.
Yeah.
And innately, put positive things in your mind. And if you continue to tell yourself that, positive things will happen. And look, I know people are like, yeah, okay, whatever. You still have to work hard. You still have to be consistent. You still have to be responsible. But there is something too that if you fill your head with negative, you're going to get negative. If you fill your head with positive, you're going to get positive. So that is kind of one of the exercises again that like I work through with people is let's really take a look at what your mindset is. And the other thing that leads to your mindset is your emotion.
Mhm.
And emotion is a whole nother area that I work with clients on around money because money is highly, highly emotionally charged for
Oh,
people,
yeah.
whether it's a positive or a negative.
Mhm.
And so that shifts your mindset too. If we can kind of clear whatever that is that you didn't even know you had about money, then that's going to change your mindset too.
Mhm.
And by that, I mean, when I say the word money, does your body tense up and like you get like, a little sick to your stomach? Or when you hear the money or hear the word money, are you like, yeah, I love money,
Yeah.
you know? It's so different for each individual, but the way that you emotionally feel about something affects your mindset as well.
Yes. I love that you do that
Yeah.
in your coaching because it's such a personable approach
Yeah.
compared to maybe a lot of others in the financial, you know, services industry. And
Yeah.
so, I like that. You're like kind of a marriage counselor as well.
For money, right? There's a whole
Yeah.
sector of behavioral finance, and I
Mhm.
find it just fascinating. I mean, I really like psychology in general as well, but behavioral finance is pretty fascinating. Of like, why do we have the spending habits that we have? Why do we have the reactions that we have? What causes us to do certain things when it comes to money? It's really, if you guys want a good book, the psychology of money is absolutely phenomenal to kind of explore this further if you guys are looking for something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, your ability to create wealth starts in your mind. I mean, if you can think it, you can do
Uh,
it.
I believe that. I really do.
Yeah.
Like I said, you still got to work hard, but first and foremost, you have to believe it.
Mhm.
You can work as hard as you want, but if you don't believe it, you're not getting anywhere. And that's not just with money. That's with anything you do in
Yeah,
life.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so I want to start speaking of wealth, I want to get into how to start building wealth. So I know one of the things that you talk about is not putting all your eggs into one financial basket, which I love because I have had a recent epiphany of that. And so my husband and I, we have meetings every Monday morning. It's kind of like
Love
our
it.
thing, and we kind of just run through our finances and figure out like, okay, what's our next step? Because we are the same in the sense of like we're like we don't want to stop here. There
Hmm.
is no plateau. Like we're going up and up and
Good.
up. So we're definitely both minded like that. And so one of the things that we talked about a lot recently is okay, like what's another basket we can get going and throw some eggs into. And so can you talk about that a little bit? Like how to start building that wealth and then kind of some ideas on small baskets that you can start putting eggs into.
Yeah. So again, right, like I don't know your whole personal situation, but there's with each individual, right, we can take and look at what is our discretionary, like meaning what extra do we have to be able to put into these investments, and that kind of dictates like what would be the first step for somebody. But I will say something super simple that individuals can do to kind of start putting eggs in baskets is I want you guys to think of finance as like two separate entities, the protection side, and I'll go into that, what I mean by that, but protection and then like wealth accumulation. And so, what do I mean by protection? Protection is like, are you essentially bulletproof? Do you have life insurance? Do you have health insurance? Do you have disability insurance? Are you doing the simple things like an emergency fund? That's what we look at and we think, okay, are we protected? Like worst case scenario, something happens to us, like we're good. Do we have estate planning in place? I mean, that's all part of like asset protection. Then we kind of move into the wealth accumulation. And yes, there are some things that you can do simultaneously that fulfill both, but really start to look at it that way. Like, at my core, am I truly protected if something happens to me or happens to my family? And it's very like apparent to people. They're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know I was supposed to have a will. I don't even know what that is. I don't have beneficiaries on my account. I don't have disability insurance. I don't have life insurance, you
Mhm.
know? So that's what I mean by that. And then your wealth accumulation is anything, right, that's helping you accumulate wealth. And you can start so simple. A high yield savings account is a perfect example. Right now the rates are, all the way up to like 4 to 5%. That's a very like good return on that type of an account.
Mhm.
So start accumulating wealth in small ways like that. Do I have, 5 grand that is sitting in a regular bank account or a checking account that I could maybe switch over to a high yield and start earning 5%? 5% is 5%, right? It's something that you didn't have and you're growing.
This is something I didn't know until recently, and
Yeah.
luckily a teller at my bank actually was like, here's my
Move
thoughts on
this.
this."
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never knew.
And it's not so that another big thing that we look at is what is how adverse are you to risk? Meaning how much risk are you willing to take or not take? And so that's a very non-risky account, right?
Mhm.
And so that's something else that we think about is when we get into more like strategy or more wealth accumulation, more like building, we have to look at some of these things like time horizon, risk tolerance, and then that's how we pick accounts for people.
Mhm.
But in the beginning, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It's, hey, am I protected at the most basic level with my insurances and an emergency fund, which I recommend 3 to 6 months of fixed expenses? And then, am I in some way, shape, or form growing, even if it's at a conservative level, like a high yield savings account? Then you can move into, I'm contributing to my employer plan. I have a traditional IRA. I've got a Roth IRA. I've got a brokerage account. I'm investing in real estate. I bought some cryptocurrency. I mean, there's so many things that you can do, but first and foremost, you got to make sure you're protected.
Mhm. Would you consider a business like a basket
I
or
do.
okay.
Yeah.
I
Yep,
didn't
I
know
do.
if that was looked at as more of, I guess depends on what kind of business or where you're at in the business stage. If you're a startup, you're not really profiting too much
Correct.
yet,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
okay. So I want to ask you something, and that is what is the best thing we could do if only one thing that would put someone in a better financial position? You could only give like one piece of advice or coaching.
Okay. This is my secret, you guys. So you better be listening to this.
Okay. I love exclusive
Yeah.
content.
I tell people this all the time and they kind of look at me dumbfounded, like, that's it? That's all you're going to tell me? But it's really that simple. Look at your stuff. And I already know you do this because
Mhm.
you just said it.
Yep.
You got to look at your stuff.
It's new for us though.
But I mean, you
Yeah.
said that, I'm like lighting up inside, right? It makes me like so happy because I am not telling you the power that you gain back over your money when you know where you sit with certain accounts, like, and what you can and cannot do. And it's 10 to 20 minutes max a week.
Of looking
So,
at everything of your
yeah,
everything.
just look at
Okay.
everything. I mean, like your investment account, right? Like you probably don't have to look at that as frequently, but I will tell you like one of the most powerful thing is like looking at your debit credit cards, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's phenomenal the amount of money that you can save and redirect elsewhere when you're like, okay, like we ate out 5 times this week
Yeah.
and I bought 2 new pairs of shoes that I didn't really need.
Or I'm paying $79 for Hulu and I don't even watch it.
Correct. Yeah, like
Yeah.
go take and people are like, I don't have time for that. Yes, you do. It's 10 to 20 minutes.
Mhm.
And I know you're on your phone scrolling for 10 to 20 minutes on pointlessness.
Yes.
But I'm telling you, the people that implement that, they come back to me and they're like, I seriously thought that was a joke that you were telling me and that it wasn't going to do anything. And it has made the biggest impact in our just like overall because we, especially in marriages or partnerships,
Yeah.
each is kind of aware of where things are going and you're working together as a team versus like, I'm going this way, you're going that way. And now we overdrafted 3 times.
Mhm.
So look at your stuff for 10 to 20 minutes a week. I'm not joking. I tell my clients, like, set a timer so that you do it and you just get in the habit of do it. And whether it's Friday evening before you go out or Sunday morning or Tuesday, whatever works for you guys, or you just take the 10 to 20 minutes and do it. But that's my secret.
Yeah,
So
I
you guys
love
you
that.
guys better use
Because
it.
like I said, it's new for us, but ever since we finally were like, okay, we're gonna do these little Monday morning meetings, and we run through business stuff, we run through finances, we run through like what we want to do with the month, or
Yep.
what we want to do with the week. And honestly, it has been great.
Yeah.
Like we are so on the same page, and I feel like our household has just been running more efficiently. So,
Yeah, it
yeah.
it truly does help, like, the efficiency of things, and again, like, I always go back to, like, what is the impact that you're making with a tool that you've been given?
Mhm.
Because in reality, like, money is nothing but neutral. It's whatever power you decide to give it. So if you decide to give it a positive power in your household by doing positive things with it, you're gonna go places. You decide to, like, use it negatively or irresponsibly, then yeah, you're gonna go down a different path. So you assign the power that you want to give your money, and the way that you do that is by your awareness of your money.
Absolutely. I love this.
Yeah.
So I want to go into talk about your coaching. So you do one-on-one coaching, and then you also have a digital financial basics course. So can you talk about those two things for people listening?
Yeah, so the basics course is literally what is financial literacy? What things do we do that kind of negatively impact how we use our money? And I break it down to the most basic level of what is credit? How do we use it? What is debit? Like, what's a credit score? What are the most common types of accounts out there? How do we use them correctly? How do we use them efficiently? What do we do with money at big transition points in our life, like buying a home, having a child? And then how do we not only navigate those things, but then how do we maintain what we build? Because that's really what it is. It's learning the basics, and then it's being able to implement a plan and then maintain that plan. And
Mhm.
so that's what the basics course is. I just wanted people to have a very simplistic, easy, it's not very long. I keep them like some of the videos like might be like a minute and a half, right? Because it's just like, what is a credit score? What does it mean?
Yeah.
This is what it is. Because those are the things that strike me the most that people are like, yeah, I just nobody ever told me
Hmm.
like what goes into it or what it means. And
Yeah.
so I just was like, let me break this down to digestible information. And then at least you know. And then if you want to learn more, you can dive deeper into it, but it gives you the basics. Um,
That's awesome. And then, like we were talking about in the beginning, no intimidation,
nope.
no like, you're feeling
Yeah.
silly because you don't know all these terms.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, it's self-paced. You just watch the videos as you want. There are like certain modules that have like a small homework assignment. Like we were talking about financial freedom. I,
Mhm.
I have individuals write down on the PDF that's provided, what is your definition of financial freedom and what are three financial goals that you want to reach? And it's simple. It's not anything crazy that I'm telling you to do, but it's the exercise of walking through it and actually doing it will make you more successful. So that's the course, and I wanted it just to be, like I said, accessible for people and easy. And then coaching kind of takes that one step further. It's a very individualized, tailored program to whatever you want to work on. So, like, I've had people come to me that are like, I literally just want you to walk me through getting out of debt. Great. Like, we will tailor a plan, we will walk through this. Or I have people that are like, I literally just want to work on being educated on investing. Great. I will teach you the basics of that. And then other people are like, just tell me what I need to know. And so I do have like a baseline of like month one, we cover this, month two, we cover this, month three, and it's a week by week thing. But you get personal contact with me and personal support throughout the entire time that we are in the coaching together. So it's very tailored, individualized.
I love that. Yeah, and I feel like both things that you offer are very like low intimidation, like just very
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't ever want people to be like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to call her this week.
Yeah.
I just think that's like such a disservice that like I would do to someone. I want someone to be like, dude, that's like my cool aunt teaching me or like my best friend. And I think that's why I've been successful is because I've had just like very organic, like carefree knowledge of finances. Like I grew up around it and nobody made it intimidating or hard for me. And so I want to like give that back to people. And, we briefly touched on this, like, especially for women,
Mhm.
it's a space that is predominantly male
Mhm.
oriented. And it's hard to find a female advisor. It's hard to find a female, like, just in the space in general. And so I just want to give them that and like serve them in that way that, hey, this is not intimidating. You are definitely capable of it. And we'll walk through this together.
Yes. Yeah, and feeling empowered of
Yeah.
being in control of your finances.
It's wild when you watch it, like, a woman who, like, comes and they don't know, and
Mhm.
they're meek, and they're just not sure, and then, they get through a couple months, and you, like, watch the progress, and then they get to the end of it, and they are just, like, a totally different human being, not only in the area of money,
Mhm.
but other areas of their life too, because they've taken that power that they've learned about money and they've like just like flown with it. It's like an
Yeah.
amazing thing to watch. They're just confident in general and they do feel empowered. And so they're like, I not only am improving in this area, but I also changed XYZ and now this is happening.
Mhm.
So it's really cool to watch that
Oh,
transformation
yeah.
in people.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of coaching for,
Yeah.
like, anything, but
Uh-huh.
I feel like it is such a transformative experience, and it's so cool to see, like, I'm sure from a coach's perspective, to see their clients from start to finish and, like, how all the growth and just, like, the difference and the empowerment and all of it, so that's really, really cool.
And it's the people doing it, right?
Mhm.
Like, I'm just educating them.
Yeah.
They're doing it. Like, and that's the coolest thing is then you remind them of that and they're like, "Oh yeah, like I did
That's me.
yeah, like I did do that."
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing.
very cool. So I love following you on social media. So if you can give everybody your social media handles, like where to find you and follow you at on there, and then also your website too, so they can find you on there.
Yeah, so I mainly just hang out on Instagram, but it's women underscore and underscore wealth underscore. You can DM me. I like it is me answering my messages. Like I manage that. So I would love to hear from you guys. And then as far as my website, it's ERA, so ERA of womenandwealth.com. And again, that is me answering my emails and responding to people. So yeah, reach out. I would love to work with you guys, love to serve you in any way that I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so, so much for coming on here. And I've loved this episode and I cannot wait for it to go out and listeners to hear it too, because I know you've given so much just in this hour that we've been talking. So yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for having me.
As always, I appreciate you all so much for listening. My goal is for these episodes to at least help one person in some aspect of their life. So if you like what you hear, don't forget to follow, like, subscribe to the show, as well as follow us on social media at Inside Voice Pod. Thanks.